Well, let's bring in Mr. Hazem. Yeah, Ms. Berlin, sorry to stop you there. I just want to bring in the Hazem Salem, political activist, who's also with us from Cairo, and have his thoughts on the situation as well. Mr. Salem, a lot of criticism Cairo has been facing the Sisi government for refusing to open the Rafah border crossing, while Egypt has come forth with a proposal and is now hosting further discussions concerning the situation in Gaza. It's being accused of not taking practical efforts right now to meet the immediate situation, and that is allowing aid to get into Gaza, allowing those wounded to get out of Gaza.
Well, the fact is the Egyptian government is associated with the Israeli one in trying to finish Hamas. And there has been some very heinous comments on the Egyptian media saying, please, Netanyahu, finish Hamas for us. And this is the situation of the Egyptian government, which is totally contradictory to that of the Egyptian people. The Egyptian people are mobilized to serve Gaza, to help Gaza, and to save Gaza. But the government did not allow the aid, and it is blocking the crossing, and it is helping Israel, and it is trying to present this Egyptian initiative, which is consulted with Israel and initiated actually in coordination with Israel. The fact is, Egyptian government is 100% associating with Israel against Hamas in this conflict.
Right, and so speaking about Hamas here and the proposal put forth by Egypt, what do you think about the ceasefire proposal? Because we heard John Kerry earlier, he was in Cairo speaking, and we heard Netanyahu as well in Tel Aviv. He was saying that Hamas is responsible now because it didn't accept the ceasefire, so it is being blamed for, according to them, prolonging the war. Hamas said, however, that it was not even given the text of the proposal, and it became aware of it through the media, and later on when it saw the text, it saw it as a, quote, surrender, that it wants its basic human rights, the human rights of the Gazans, to be respected, which is not based on that ceasefire. So do you think Hamas has a point by not accepting that ceasefire offer, and do you think that it's not going to be helpful, this kind of a ceasefire?
Well, if Hamas accepts this kind of ceasefire, it would be accepting a total demolition of all of Gaza. They already paid the price by these 600 martyrs in order to get better life and open crossings and a better life for all the Gazan people. The Gaza people did not mind paying the price in order to get the victory that will ensure the next generations. For Israel, it will keep on killing civilians to pressure. And for the international community, or the so-called international community, it will keep celebrating Israel killing civilians and ignoring it and trying to put some justification for it and blaming Hamas. They want Hamas to surrender by accepting that deal. And the fact is, it is the responsibility of Arab and Islamic countries to arm Gaza, to help Gaza to resist more and more, and even to give Gaza anti-aircraft missiles. If this happened, Israeli planes will never touch Gaza anymore. The fact is, it's a fight for dignity, and we have to fight till the end. And this is what the Egyptians, the Gazans, and all the Muslims should believe. But these collaborators with the international community, they want a full defeat for Hamas and full defeat for Palestinians and their Islamic cause.
Let's go back to our guest, Ms. Berlin in Nice, and have her thoughts on something else that was raised a lot in the media. Ms. Berlin, now a lot has been said about the nature of Hamas, what kind of a group Hamas is, what is Hamas after, and some writers were suggesting what we're seeing in Gaza is leading everyone to suddenly come to the conclusion Hamas is not the terrorist here. Hamas has a right to defend not just Hamas, the other Palestinian resistance fighters in Gaza, to defend the Palestinians in Gaza against what's happening to them, though Israel, though the United States or the United Nations do not admit that. But it looks like a whole, scope of the public opinion is coming to believe that it was elected democratically, it has been protecting people in Gaza, and it was even forming and in the verge of forming a unity deal with other Palestinian factions to present a unified Palestinian stance when it came under this attack. So do you think that perceptions are now changing?
I do think perceptions are changing. Free Gaza movement was always dealing civil society to civil society and not government to government. But you can see that people are changing now. Look at the demonstrations around the world. I mean, I've been doing this since 1967 when there were 4 of us standing in front of the Israeli consulate in Israel. There were 100,000 people just in the UK, just in London. And that's why I say that it's going to be civil society that's going to change this. Civil society in Egypt, civil society around the world is going to say, we're not going to stand for this anymore. And Hamas has the right to defend its people.
So, today officials in Iran were saying that the least the world can do is to isolate Israel, is to, refrain from giving more weapons and equipment to Israel and to condemn Israel for what's happening. We saw Mr. Riyad Mansour there describing what took place in Shuja'iyya. It absolutely looks like and sounds like a war crime massacre. We've been hearing of phosphorus bombs being used, of very, military equipment that's not legal to use in civilian areas being used in Gaza. But do you think that we are going to see this isolation? Do you think we're going to see those responsible being brought to justice? Because what was really ironic for me today was Netanyahu saying the international community must hold Hamas to account for what's happening in Gaza. He was suggesting that those who are being killed are responsible for being killed.
Yes, I heard him. He tends to be a myth in his own mind. He said that the Palestinians want to be killed because they're telegenic, and so that we can watch them and see what they look like. I don't know where the man is coming from. I think people are beginning to see that none of this makes any sense unless you see, of course, that what Israel really wants is they want to reoccupy Gaza. They want to steal the 1.3 trillion cubic feet of natural gas off the coast of Gaza, and they want their beachfront property, and they want Gaza with as few Palestinians in it as they can possibly manage. And what we have to realize, I think, as an international community, is that Israel needs to be isolated. Countries are already beginning to take some of their diplomats out of Israel, or telling the Israelis to leave, for example. I think this will be a snowball. I think this is one of the worst things that Netanyahu could have done. It's not good for Israelis either.
Well, let's go back to our guest in Cairo on this as well. Mr. Salem, what do you think about the objective of the Israelis here? Is this about an occupation of Gaza, the gas deposits we're hearing in some reports? Is this just about a campaign of fear among Gazans? Is this against the unity between Palestinians? What is this all about?
Well, they have a whole agenda of things to do, including first to demolish the resistance in Gaza. And when this is done, all the resources of Gaza will be in the hands of Israel. All the people of Gaza will be submitting to Israel, and Israel will try to say, we have restored Gaza once again. The fact is, Israelis thought that they will not face much resistance. They thought that their homes are intact and that the missiles of the resistance will not touch them much, and that their Iron Dome will protect them. So they thought that they will have the airstrike, then the land invasion, then all of Gaza will be restored under Israeli control. But this all went to the very contrary. The only thing that the Israelis thought and went even more than their expectations was some Arab regimes supporting Israel, and Arab intellectuals and media people supporting Israel. That was the thing that Israel could be really surprised about. They are not, of course, surprised about the international community or United Nations or United States supporting Israel. This is not a surprise. The fact is, these international community members don't fear anything, not even the resistance of the civil society in their own countries. They don't care. They just bombard them by allowing Israel to kill the civilians. Now there should be something that tells that civil society all over the world should be toppling these countries' regimes and setting things for a new era of humanity without the imperialism or colonialism or occupation. This is a new call for all of the world to unite for a cause, starting from Gaza.
Right, and Ms. Berlin, I'd like to point out something else that Ban Ki-moon said earlier on today. He said, my message to both sides is, quote, stop fighting and start talking. How helpful do you find this message? We earlier had Kerry saying that the way forward now is for Hamas to accept the ceasefire, and then we'll sit down and negotiate about the underlying issues, the way he put it. What do you think?
It's awfully hard for the oppressed to talk to the oppressor, or the occupied to talk to the occupier. But people like Ban Ki-moon and Kerry want us to assume that these are two equal sides. But Gaza has no army, it has no navy, it has no air force. These are a popular resistance movement that are doing their best to try to help their own people. And for them to even suggest that somehow they need to sit down and talk, well, they've been talking since 1948. And Israel's been stealing since 1948.
So the problem here, you're saying, is that there is maybe a deliberate, we could call, effort to ignore the core problem or the core issues here, the problem of occupation, the problem of the Israeli siege on Gaza. As you say, what Hamas was saying earlier, or other resistance fighters, according to our correspondents on the ground, was that we can't agree to a similar solution that was promoted in 2012, a ceasefire there, because of what's happening right now. So how can you expect us to go ahead with a ceasefire and to continue this cycle of violence? So what is the way forward then? What do you think needs to be done? Do you think that this resistance should continue until there's enough pressure internationally on Israel and on international governments to do something about this?
Of course, that's the Palestinians' call in Gaza. It's not ours. We will do whatever they want as far as those of us who support this. It's ironic that 6 years ago, in August, we sent that first boat into Gaza, and we arrived safely, 44 of us. And we got in another 5 times. And ever since that, Israel has either confiscated our boats, murdered our passengers. You know, they're going to do their best to keep the siege in place, even though most of us think it's illegal. So I think the first thing that has to be done is what civil society is trying to do right now, and that's hold their governments accountable for their support of Israel.
Well, thank you very much for your thoughts, Ms. Greta Berlin, co-founder of the Free Gaza Movement. A big thank you to a guest in Cairo as well, Mr. Hazem Salem, political activist. Thank you so much for staying with us, everyone, here on our rolling coverage of the war on Gaza. Do stay with us. I'll be back in a couple of minutes with the top 5.